You hear it all the time. £100,000. Six figures. A salary that sounds like you've won. A salary that on paper puts you in a completely different category from most people around you. And for years that number lives in your head like a finish line. You imagine what life must feel like once you get there. You imagine freedom, security, space to breathe, the end of money stress. And then some people actually get there. And something strange happens. They don't feel rich. Not really. They feel stable. They feel less fragile. They feel more respectable. But rich? No. And that is where the illusion begins. Because in London there is a huge difference between earning £100,000 and feeling like £100,000 should feel. This video is not about pretending 100,000 is a bad salary. It isn't. It is a very good salary. A lot of people would love to earn it. A lot of people work incredibly hard and never get near it. So this is not one of those out-of-touch conversations where someone on a high income complains that life is impossible. That's not the point. The point is this. Why does a number that sounds so big so often produce a life that feels so normal? Why does six figures in London still leave people checking their banking app, thinking carefully before major purchases, postponing big decisions, and quietly wondering why they still don't feel financially free? Because the salary number is not the story. It is the headline, and the headline hides almost everything that matters. The tax system matters, housing costs matter, transport matters, social expectations matter, lifestyle inflation matters, and maybe more than anything else, the psychological trap matters. Because once you earn more, you do not simply get more money. You enter a different game, a game where the costs are higher, the standards are higher, the expectations are higher, and the emotional pressure can be higher too. So today we are going to break that game apart. We're going to look at why £100,000 in London sounds far more powerful than it often feels. Why high earners still feel stuck. Why salary alone rarely creates real wealth. And why so many people in UK tech, finance, consulting, and other high-income careers eventually realize they are being paid very well, but not in a way that truly sets them free. And once you see this clearly, you stop chasing money the same way. Let's start with the first mistake almost everyone makes. They treat gross salary like usable money. They hear £100,000 and mentally divide it by 12. They imagine this huge monthly stream. They picture abundance. But gross salary is not your lifestyle. Gross salary is the number you are shown before reality takes its share. And that matters because most people are emotionally reacting to the wrong number. They are reacting to the headline, not the lived experience. The lived experience is what arrives after tax, after national insurance, after pension contributions if you make them, after student loan deductions for many people, after rent, after travel, after ordinary modern life. And when all of that hits at once, the glamour of the number starts dissolving very quickly. That is why people can get a huge salary jump on paper and then feel almost confused a few months later. They expected a transformation. What they got was a slightly wider runway, more cushioning, less panic, maybe a better flat, maybe a nicer neighborhood, maybe better holidays, maybe the ability to stop worrying about smaller bills. But the dramatic leap they imagined, that often never arrives, because London is incredibly efficient at absorbing income. Now think about where £100,000 tends to sit psychologically. For a lot of people, it is not just a salary target, it is a status target. It signals intelligence, achievement, market value, professional credibility. It tells you that you are doing better than average, and there is absolutely truth in that. But status and wealth are not the same thing, and one of the most dangerous financial confusions in modern city life is mistaking a high-status income for high-level wealth. A high-status income means the market values your labor. Wealth means you have built assets, flexibility and independence that do not disappear the moment your salary stops. Those are not the same, not even close. A person earning £100,000 and spending almost all of it can look successful while remaining deeply dependent. A person earning less but controlling expenses, investing consistently, and building income outside their job can be much closer to actual freedom. And that is the part many people do not want to hear. Because salary is visible, wealth often isn't. Salary gives immediate recognition. Wealth often looks boring for a long time. Salary gets praise. Wealth often gets built in silence. So if you want to understand why 100,000 in London can feel disappointing, you have to start here. The number is impressive, but the mechanism behind the number is still fragile. You are still trading time for money. You are still living inside an expensive system. You are still exposed to tax, inflation, housing pressure, and lifestyle creep. And unless you use that salary strategically, you can end up living a premium version of the same dependency. That is the trap. Now let's talk about London specifically, because £100,000 does not feel the same everywhere. In a lower-cost city, that salary can create much more space. In London, it collides with one of the most expensive everyday environments in Europe. And London does not only take your money in obvious ways, it takes it in invisible ways too. Everyone notices rent. Everyone notices house prices. Everyone notices the cost of going out. But fewer people notice the subtler pressure of the city. The pressure to live near the right places. The pressure to save time through convenience. The pressure to look put together. The pressure to avoid long commutes. The pressure to socialize at a certain level. The pressure to feel like your lifestyle matches your profession. And none of that sounds dramatic when you say it out loud. But it compounds fast. Because in London, almost every improvement to your life has a price tag attached to it. A shorter commute costs more, a quieter flat costs more, a nicer gym costs more space costs more, a safer area costs more, being close to your office costs more, being close to good restaurants costs more, dating costs more, networking costs more, protecting your time costs more. So what happens? High earners begin paying not just for survival, but for friction reduction. And that sounds smart. In some ways it is smart, but it also means your money disappears into comfort-preserving systems at a shocking speed. And this is where lifestyle inflation becomes dangerous. Because lifestyle inflation is rarely as stupid as people make it sound. It is not always someone buying designer nonsense and trying to look rich. A lot of the time, lifestyle inflation looks rational. You are tired, so you order food. You work hard, so you upgrade your flat. You commute too much, so you move closer. You finally have money, so you make your life smoother. Individually, each choice makes sense. That is exactly why it is so powerful. No single decision feels reckless, but together they quietly rebuild your financial prison at a higher level of comfort. That is the real danger. You do not feel irresponsible. You feel sensible. You tell yourself you are finally living the way a successful adult should live. And maybe you are. But the cost of that identity can be enormous, because now your outgoings are no longer built around survival. They are built around maintaining a version of success. And once your life is calibrated around maintaining success, every decision becomes heavier. You hesitate more before career risks. You tolerate bad jobs for longer. You put off entrepreneurship. You stay in cities you no longer love. You keep earning, because the machine you built now has to be fed. This is why people on high salaries can still feel trapped, not because they are poor, but because their freedom has not scaled as fast as their income. And then we come to the biggest misunderstanding of all. People assume that a high salary should automatically create wealth. But salary does not create wealth by itself. Salary creates opportunity. What you do with that opportunity determines whether wealth appears. This is one of the most important distinctions in personal finance, and most people only understand it far too late. A salary is a resource stream. Wealth is what remains after decisions. If your salary rises and your costs rise with it, your life can look dramatically upgraded while your long-term position barely changes. If your salary rises and your savings rate, investing rate, or ownership rate rises with it, that is when the number starts becoming powerful. So the real question is never, how much do you earn? The real question is, How much of your financial life gets stronger every year, even if your salary stopped tomorrow? That is the harder question, and it is the one that reveals everything. Think about the emotional experience of someone chasing £100,000. Maybe they start on 35, then 50, then 65, then 80, then eventually they cross into six figures. At every stage, they imagine that the next jump will be the one that changes everything. When I get to 50, I'll relax. When I get to 70, I'll finally save properly. When I get to 90, I'll feel comfortable. When I get to 100, I'll feel secure. And the reason this keeps failing is simple. Each salary increase gets pre-spent in the imagination long before it arrives. People mentally allocate money before they even receive it. They think about moving, upgrading, traveling more, buying time back, buying status, buying relief. So when the raise comes, it does not feel like pure progress. It feels like catching up with the lifestyle they had already emotionally promised themselves. That is why high earners can feel permanently almost there. They are always close to the feeling they want, but not quite inside it, and that almost can last for years. Now let's talk about one of the hardest truths in the entire conversation. For a lot of professionals in London, £100,000 is not freedom money. It is stability money. That sounds disappointing, but it is important. Freedom money is when your choices meaningfully expand, when you can step away from work without panic, when you can turn down bad opportunities, when you can take a slower year if you need one, when you can survive shocks without your whole life tightening. Stability money is when life becomes more manageable, but your dependence on continued income remains high. And for many people in London, 100,000 falls much closer to stability than freedom. Yes, it is better than the vast majority of salaries. Yes, it gives breathing room. Yes, it can absolutely be a platform for building wealth. But on its own, it usually does not do the full job. And that matters because if you misunderstand what the number is for, you use it badly. If you think it is freedom, you celebrate too early. If you understand it is a platform, you use it strategically. That means building reserves, investing, reducing fragility, avoiding stupid fixed costs, maybe eventually creating equity, ownership, or side income. That is how a high salary stops being impressive on paper and starts becoming powerful in reality. There is also a social dimension people rarely talk about. When you earn more in London, you often end up surrounded by people who normalize expensive behavior, not because they are evil, not because they are showing off, because everyone calibrates to their environment. If your friends all earn well, a dinner that used to feel extravagant now feels ordinary. A holiday that used to feel ambitious now feels standard. A certain postcode feels normal. Certain brands feel normal. A certain level of convenience feels normal. That is how relative wealth works. You can be objectively high income and still feel average in your immediate world. And humans do not experience money in a vacuum. We experience it socially. We compare constantly, quietly, automatically. So a person on 100,000 in London can still feel behind. Behind homeowners, behind people with family money, behind people in the US, behind founders with equity, behind people whose parents helped with deposits, behind people who got into property earlier, behind people who left London and kept remote salaries. That comparison is emotionally exhausting, and if you are not careful, it pushes you into chasing external signals instead of solving the actual financial problem in front of you. Now let's zoom out. Why does this matter so much for channels like this one, for UK tech, and for ambitious people trying to build better lives? Because a lot of modern careers are built on a hidden promise. The promise is this: if you become valuable enough, skilled enough, employable enough, the system will eventually reward you with freedom. And sometimes it does, but often it rewards you with something else. A very polished cage, a very respectable dependency, a life that looks successful from the outside and feels strangely conditional on the inside. That is especially true in industries where salary growth is good enough to keep you committed, but not explosive enough to break the structure quickly. You get paid just enough to stay motivated, just enough to avoid rebellion, just enough to delay big risks, just enough to believe the next promotion will solve everything. And that is why so many smart people stay on the treadmill for years. Not because they lack intelligence, because the treadmill gets nicer the higher you go. And this is exactly where mindset has to change. If you are on a high salary or chasing one, the question is not whether the number is good. The number is good. The question is whether you are using the number as a destination or as a tool. If it is a destination, you will probably be disappointed. If it is a tool, you can do something powerful with it. You can use it to buy time. You can use it to build cash reserves. You can use it to invest. You can use it to reduce desperation. You can use it to learn high-value skills. You can use it to move into ownership. But that only happens if you resist the temptation to convert every salary increase into immediate lifestyle evidence, because the world will constantly invite you to do exactly that. Your environment will tell you to display progress. Your peers will normalize upgrades. Your exhaustion will justify convenient spending. Your ego will want proof that you are doing well. And if all of that wins, £100,000 becomes a maintenance package, not a wealth engine. Let's make this even more concrete. Imagine two people earning the same high salary in London. The first person treats the salary as validation. They move into a more expensive place. They increase monthly commitments. They use money to reduce discomfort everywhere. They invest a bit, maybe. They save a bit, maybe. But mostly they consume the upgrade. From the outside, they look successful very quickly. The second person treats the salary as leverage. They still improve their life, but carefully. They avoid locking in too many fixed costs. They protect their savings rate. They invest aggressively relative to their previous self. They focus on optionality. They try to make sure that every year of high income leaves a permanent trace on their future. From the outside, they may look less impressive at first, but 5 years later the gap can be enormous. Not because one earned more, because one converted income into durability and the other converted income into image and comfort. That is what people miss. The number is only the raw material. Your structure determines the outcome. This is also why conversations about salary are often emotionally misleading. People love to ask what others earn. They do not ask enough about what others keep. They do not ask enough about family support. They do not ask enough about debt. They do not ask enough about housing circumstances. They do not ask enough about savings rate. They do not ask enough about equity. They do not ask enough about whether someone is one bad year away from stress. So they compare visible income and invisible balance sheets. And invisible balance sheets are where reality lives. A person earning less with low fixed costs, assets, and optionality may be in a far stronger position than someone earning more with prestige, expenses, and no buffer. That is why chasing salary without designing the rest of your financial life can become a very sophisticated form of self-deception. Now, none of this means high salaries do not matter. They matter enormously. A high salary can accelerate your life in ways that lower income simply cannot. It can give you margin. It can give you dignity. It can reduce anxiety. It can create choices you did not have before. That is real, and it should not be minimized. But that is exactly why it is worth thinking clearly about. Because if a high salary is such a valuable resource, wasting its potential is even more tragic. If you are lucky enough to reach a high income, the goal should not just be to feel richer temporarily. The goal should be to become structurally stronger, less fragile, less dependent, less trapped by fixed costs, more capable of taking strategic risk, more able to say no, more able to redesign your life later. That is what the money is really for. Not just to upgrade your present, but to alter your future bargaining power. And this is the moment where many people realize something uncomfortable. The thing they actually wanted was never just a higher salary. It was relief. It was control. It was the ability to stop worrying. It was dignity. It was freedom from stupid compromises. And when they finally get a bigger number but still do not fully get those feelings, the disappointment can be strangely personal. They start wondering if they are ungrateful, if they are bad with money, if they are secretly impossible to satisfy. But often the answer is simpler. The salary was never designed to deliver all of that by itself. Not in a city like London, not inside a system that taxes, prices, and socially pressures high earners so effectively. Not in an environment where your costs can expand almost as elegantly as your income. So if £100,000 sounds huge to you and also somehow feels underwhelming once you analyze it, you are not crazy. You are seeing the difference between symbolic wealth and functional freedom, and that difference changes everything. So what should someone actually do with this understanding? First, stop worshipping salary milestones as if they are magic. They are useful, they are powerful, they are not magic. Second, become obsessed with fixed costs, not because you should live miserably, because fixed costs decide how trapped you are. A high income with low structural obligations is powerful. A high income with huge recurring obligations is fragile. Third, think in terms of optionality, not just consumption. Every decision should quietly answer this question. Does this make my life more flexible later or less flexible later? Fourth, build ownership somewhere. That could mean investments. It could mean equity. It could mean a business. It could mean digital assets, content, or anything that compounds beyond your hours. Because salary is only one engine, and one engine is rarely enough if your goal is actual freedom. Fifth, remember that the point of money is not to impress your current environment. The point of money is to create a life that is robust, intentional, and increasingly yours. There is a reason this conversation hits so hard for ambitious people. Because ambition often begins with income goals. That is normal. When you have less, money looks like the answer to everything. And to be fair, sometimes more money does solve a lot. But later, if you keep maturing financially, ambition changes shape. It stops being about earning an impressive number. It starts being about designing a life where numbers do not control your emotions in the same way. Where a bad month does not terrify you. Where your job is important but not absolute. Where your lifestyle is enjoyable but not imprisoning. Where success is measured less by display and more by resilience. That is the deeper level, and most people never reach it because they stay hypnotized by salary benchmarks. So when you hear someone say they earn £100,000 in London, the real response should not be automatic awe, it should be curiosity. How much freedom does that actually buy them? How much stress did they remove? How much did they simply upgrade? How much do they keep? How much are they building? How much optionality did they create? Because those questions tell you whether the salary is changing their life or just decorating the same dependency. Gauze, and if you are the one chasing the number, this is your chance to do something most people do not. To reach a high income without getting seduced by the illusion. To understand in advance that 6 figures in London is not the end of the financial story. It is the point where the story becomes more subtle, more psychological, more structural, more dependent on judgment than on pure earnings. In the end, £100,000 in London is a very revealing number. It is high enough to look like victory, but often not high enough to deliver the kind of freedom people imagine. And that gap between expectation and reality teaches you something incredibly valuable. It teaches you that wealth is not a salary bracket. It is a system of keeping more, owning more, needing less, and building options. If you do not build that system, even a powerful income can leave you feeling strangely ordinary. If you do build that system, then a high salary can become the launch pad it was always supposed to be. So the next time you hear 6 figures in London, do not ask whether it sounds impressive. Ask a better question. What does that person actually keep? And maybe the most important question of all, are they getting richer or just getting better at surviving expensively? Because those are two very different lives, and only one of them leads anywhere worth going. If you understand that early, you stop chasing numbers blindly. You start building leverage. You start protecting flexibility. You start using income as a tool, not an identity. And that is when money stops looking impressive and starts becoming useful.